Hello to everybody. I'm gonna try to make this tutorial as short as possible. Today we're gonna make this visualization of a logo. I'm gonna try to keep the process and the final result as close as I can to this. I think without saying anything else, we can start. So you're gonna need a logo. So I've got the logo split into two parts, and you're just gonna have to go to File, Save As. You're gonna choose Illustrator and Illustrator 8. So after it, just drag the Illustrator file into your C4D layout, click OK. So right now we need to connect the backplate and the main logo by itself. We're gonna separate the huge letters and the smaller ones just for the sake of ease. We're gonna first of all select all of these. Let's select all of them. And first of all put them in a group. I'm gonna call this logo. I'm also gonna put the backplate inside of a group and I'm gonna call this backplate. It's already more organized. This is really nice. So let's select all of our logo parts, go into point mode, select all of them, and just set the z-axis to 0. This is important because once we are going to extrude everything, this might make a lot of errors and it's just going to make everything a little bit harder than it should be. Same I'm going to do for the backplate. So let's combine them. I'm going to put this into the center. Something like this should be okay. So let's proceed to extruding. We're gonna go to our logo. We're gonna create a connect modifier inside of our logo, and we're gonna place every single path inside of the connect. We are doing this so we can extrude every single thing by extruding it all at once, not extruding everything individually. After this, we're gonna go to extrude. So another problem we're gonna have is that you're gonna have something like this, and this is fixed by just selecting every single spline and pressing close spline. As you see, the problem is fixed. Let's press on our extrude and make it something like 1. We're gonna go to caps, and this is where the interesting stuff begins. So let's make our caps bigger, and we can turn off the work plane. So we're gonna make it something like 4, even smaller. So 0.4 seems to do the job. To me it looks pretty good. We can actually set the interpolation for every single one, the uniform, and we're gonna place it around like 64 points. I would actually separate the small letter logo, so let's separate it from this part, and I'm gonna place this in a extrude modifier. And I'm gonna place the size of the extrude to 1 also. Let's turn everything on, back on. And we're gonna have to have this -1 since it's going backwards. So I'm gonna turn on the caps over here also, and I'm gonna place this to 0.1, at least to see what it looks like. 0.075. So to me it looks good. Yeah, I'm going to keep it this way. A lot of you are probably asking, but the geometry looks like complete garbage. What are we gonna do about it? And without going into hard typology stuff and learning modeling techniques, I'm just gonna make everything really simple, and we're just gonna put this in a volume measure. So let's put both of these in the volume. In the volume builder. Let's put both of these in the volume builder, and I'm gonna place a much smaller number, something like 0.05, even lower. 0.03 looks okay. And let's actually make the connect a tolerance smaller, because it's obviously messing with some of our geometry. The caps on the bevel could also use a higher topology. I would set this to 24. Because we have those angled parts on our logo. And already it is starting to look much better, so we can actually even turn off the volume builder and look at what it looks like. And even now it looks much better, so let's turn everything back on. And let's place a SDF smooth on this, and I'm gonna set this to 1. And we're actually going to go a little bit lower, something to 0.015. So we're starting to get the original geometry really well, because our volume is more dense. and also the angles that were really sharp are getting smoothed by the SDF smooth. I think it's starting to look really cool. We can stop on the logo. I think you can play with this all day. I'm just gonna make the logo, the small logo caps a little bit bigger. We're gonna move to the backplate. We can actually turn off the logo for now. So let's do the same exact process for our backplate. So I would stop you just right here because we're gonna do a really cool effect on our backplate. Maybe you noticed, maybe you didn't, but we had a really cool kind of a cutout from our backplate with our logo. And this is not a really hard thing to do. All we gotta do is just take out both of our extrudes. So we're gonna duplicate them. I'm gonna place them in a group and call this a cutout. And we're gonna place them in our volume builder with our backplate. Place them in the volume builder and let's place them on the top. And instead of union, you're gonna have to select subtract. And if we move them a little bit out, you're gonna see that they're literally cutting out a hole in our backplate. And I think this is really cool because also we can go to our volume builder and adjust the radius. So we can place something like 0.05, maybe something a little bit bigger. And yeah, so you see, number one makes a huge difference. It's making the cutout expand. If we make the voxel size a little bit smaller, so 0.05, and if we add an SDF smooth, well, we can make the radius a little bit smaller, of course. I think so, like 0.75. And if we turn back on our logo and move it a little bit forward, you're gonna see that it is looking really nice. And you can play with the radius, you can play with the you can basically play with everything all day long. We're gonna make the radius a little bit smaller, also to like 0.45, since I still need the angled shape. So I'm going to put this in the volume measure, and I'm also gonna put the logo into volume measure. So let's set up the camera, and this is kind of easy. We're gonna place a normal camera. I'm gonna make a null, and I'm gonna call this cam. I'm gonna make the focal length to like something like 25, well, actually a little bit smaller, I think. So let's place the camera in the very, very center. We have to move the null to the center and move the camera to the center, and you can do this by resetting both of the positions, and the shortcut to this is Alt 0. So Alt 0 to the camera, Alt 0 to the null. So let's move the camera back. And I'm going to place this in a group. I'm gonna call this object. And now we can rotate it. Something like this. So the camera could actually use something like 20, even less. Because we're trying to get this really cool perspective. I can use even a smaller focal length to like 15. And I think it looks fine to me. And let's go to the render view. So you're gonna have to open a new window. This is gonna be redshift render view. I have it set up with my window layout. You can set it up the same way. If you want, I will make a tutorial on this. So I've made it 3840 by 3840, and you can use anything you want. I'm just really comfortable working in this ratio. I'm gonna start the IPR, and we have something really not beautiful, I would say. So to make this a little better, I would just create a dome light. I'm gonna put this in a null, and I'm going to call this lights. So to test out the reflections, I'm just gonna put a new material on our object, and in the material, this is not a final material, this is not a material we're gonna use. For the sake of experimenting with the reflections, I'm just gonna make everything metal, and the roughness is gonna be the minimal amount, so like 0.1. So on our dome light, I'm just basically going to choose any HDRI with some huge amount of reflections. So I have this TV studio, and as you see, it is really bright, it is really reflective, and it has a lot of light sources and reflective surfaces that create a huge amount of reflections. This might be too colorful for us, so I'm just gonna set the saturation to 6. And it is already starting to look pretty cool. I'm gonna turn off the background, and I'm going to turn off the diffuse channel, because we don't want this to be affecting our diffuse. So let's rotate this until we get something interesting. So something like this looks good to me, because it has a lot of reflective surfaces on our sides, but it doesn't affect the front. So that's exactly what we need. We can delete the metal material for now, because, well, we can just work on the actual materials. I'm gonna add a new material, I'm gonna add a second material, I'm gonna call this 1 and 2. So on our first material, the logo one, we're gonna turn up the metalness to 1, the color to like 90, and the roughness to necessarily 0.1. Actually even lower, but we're still gonna change it, so it doesn't really matter for now. On our backplate material, I'm gonna choose the black color, so the lightness is gonna be around 8, the roughness is gonna be 0.5. Also, we're gonna change it, so it doesn't really matter. So I'm gonna pump up the gamma, because I don't really like the way we have a lot of reflections on the front panel, and you can rotate it a little bit also, so we don't get those reflections on the front panel. This is pretty important, so you gotta spend a little time on this. So something like this looks good. We're gonna lower the intensity to 0.1. So we just get those small reflective blinks, I guess. I don't know what I should call this. Before we start finalizing the materials, we're gonna work on the lighting. And the lighting over here is a really, at first seeming complex method, but I think it's pretty simple. You just have to spam a lot of lights, basically spamming a lot of lights on the metal parts. I'm gonna create a group inside of here, and this is gonna be lights also, just to simplify. And I'm going to place a area light inside of it. So we're gonna make this a disk, and we're going to include only the metal part, so only the logo. This is done, so we're gonna have the logo part shining like this, and the backplate not shining at all. So we should lower the intensity to something like 1, so it doesn't really cast a lot of secondary rays on our backplate. So 1 seems enough, 2 seems more than enough, and I'm gonna leave this at 2. So our goal is to make a lot of reflections, a lot of blinks, and this is done by just, well, correctly spamming the lights all around the place. And I'm just gonna speed up the process, but you're gonna understand the way this is done by just looking at what I'm doing. So you can notice that I literally just spammed the lights all over the place, and also you can not light every single thing up. It looks pretty cool when there's some black and white colors, so it makes a lot of contrast. For example, like over here, I really enjoyed the way this part is looking. It's time for lighting up the backplate, and well, you can call this logo, and we're gonna make another null, and I'm gonna call this backplate. And for backplate, you don't have to have a lot of stuff, a lot of light. You can just also include the backplate like we did with the metal one. Just make the light smaller, and I think it's gonna be fine. All we gotta do is just light it up a little bit on the edge, so it's making the overall shape visible, because right now it's completely black. So something like, well, actually we can just place a target tag on our light and make it bigger. Not really big, but something like this, so it fills up some of the shapes. I'm gonna make this something like 5. So let's start making the materials. I'm gonna start with the backplate. I'm going to start by placing a texture, some random wall texture I made, and it looks like this with uncorrect UV unwrapping, and we're gonna correctly UV unwrap this. So let's go to the backplate. We're gonna place it on the top over here we're gonna place the materials on the top of the null objects. And let's choose both of them and just go with the cubic. This is gonna be more than enough for the object we have. And I'm just gonna make the scale a little bit higher. So something like 4, I think, is gonna be pretty good. And you can actually play with the UV unwrapping, and we can make the UV much smaller so it's not making the seams. We can move it so it's not making the seams so visible. Let's go in the material, and we're gonna add a change range node. This is similar to ramp, but we can actually more precisely adjust the values. So the first one is gonna go to IR. Let's plug in the texture. Let's look at the change range, and we're going to make it more contrast. So I think this looks really good. Let's plug this into the IR. Reflection, IR. Let's look at what it looks like. Doesn't really do anything because we gotta change the second values. So the minimum value is gonna be 1, and the top value is gonna be 1.4. We can go higher, but not too high. I'm gonna leave it at 2. And we're probably not gonna see any changes just because the reflection is too low. So let's add the texture to input to our bottom change range, and over here we're gonna make this also more contrasty. And on the bottom, the new change range minimum is gonna be 0.025, maximum is 0.65. And let's look at what it looks like with the reflection. Looks pretty bad, and let's adjust the reflection a little bit more. So let's solo this out again, and let's make this even more contrasty. So this is 0.7, this is going to be 0.75. Let's look at, and we have to invert this, so let's 75, 0.7. So over here, we're starting to get some really cool scratches. We can play with this even more if we start to bump up the max IR. So let's go to 5, for example, and you can see that we're getting it really bright parts. So we can control the brightness also, and you can go basically over here and just set this even lower to like 0.5. So you can just change those values, and it's basically going to change the overall brightness of the scratches. So I think I'm going to stick with something like this. And also on the top, we're starting to get a little texture, but we can just bump the lower to 0.1, and this is gonna increase the visibility really much. So let's start to work on the metal, and the metal is going to be almost the same, except we're just not gonna use the IR. We're gonna use basically the same texture. I'm just gonna offset this a little bit. So let's offset this to like 0.4. This is gonna be good. And let's add this to our roughness, and we should lower the UV, make it smaller, and we can actually change the texture over here to something like fingerprints or anything that you want. And if you're changing the texture, also don't forget to change your values, because the brightness of each individual texture is different, and you're gonna have some problems if you don't change them. All of the stuff that you can play with is just uncountable. So thank you everybody for watching this. This is my first video. I hope it's really entertaining, and I hope you learned something new. Goodbye.